Hello everybody, welcome to Kingdom of Learning. So today is the day 8 of our series of class 12, that is do the whole syllabus of class 12 in 15 days, and today is day 8. And in this video I'm going to explain the chapter Poets and Pancakes, that is chapter 6 of your book Flamingo. And in this video only one chapter will be explained because this is a very long chapter as well as very confusing also, and if I call it the most disliked chapter by the students, I won't be wrong, because generally students are not able to understand what is the writer trying to convey through this chapter. So I try to make it as simple as possible. Do watch the video till last, because at last I will tell you about some important questions which do come from this chapter. So now let's start. So first of all, about the author Asoka Mitran. He is a Tamil writer, and he recounts his years at Gemini Studios in his book My Years with Boss, which talks of the influence of movies on every aspect of life. Means in this chapter actually the writer Asoka Mitran is trying to tell us about his experiences at Gemini Studio. So Gemini Studio was a studio where movies were made, and means the movies were shot over, and here the experiences of the author are shown in this chapter. So first of all, it is given that Pancake was the brand name of the makeup material that Gemini Studios bought in truckloads. Means because movies were made over there, so definitely the actors and actresses, they had to put on the makeup on their face. So that Pancake was the brand, was the product which was used so much on their face that truckloads of pancakes was brought at Gemini Studios. So then the writer tells us that about this pancake, Greta Garbo must have heard, Miss Gohar must have used it, and Vijyanti Mala must have used it, but Rati Agnihotri must not have heard about it. It shows that all the old heroines, means the heroines who were working in movies in the earlier times, they used it, they were familiar with this pancake, but later on the use of pancakes was stopped in the film industry. So this is what the writer means to say. And then he says that this had been means people believe that this building was believed to have been Robert Clive's stables. So now Robert Clive was a Britisher, and he came in Madras to live for some time, and then he made a stable, and stable is a place where horses are kept, and later on this stable was converted into this Gemini Studio. So again, means so many funny details are given, ironical details are given in this chapter. And then then the writer tells us that this makeup room had the look of a hair cutting salon with lights at all the angles around. Half a dozen large mirrors were there. And then this makeup department was first headed by a Bengali, then it was headed by a Maharashtrian, then one man who was from Andhra Pradesh, then one Madras Indian Christian. Means actually so many people became the heads of the makeup department of Gemini Studio. This is being told by the writer to us. And then this gang of nationally integrated makeup men could turn any decent looking person into a hideous crimson hued monster. Means the writer is saying that actually these makeup men, what is the purpose of doing makeup? So that a person can look beautiful. But here the writer is saying ironically that these so many makeup men, their purpose was to make a person look ugly. Means they would make a person like a monster. So this was being done at that Gemini Studio. Again, irony is used here, because truckloads of pancakes was ordered, and that pancake was just poured onto the faces of these people, and they looked so ugly after using that pancake. And then the chief makeup man made the chief actors, and then again there was an order. Means the writer is telling us that the chief makeup man will make the hero and heroine ugly. Then in the same sequence, means those makeup men who will come under that chief makeup man, and in the same order actors and actresses were made uglier by them. So again a funny thing, means instead of making them more beautiful, they were making them uglier. So that is quite funny. And then the writer is telling us about an office boy. Means at Gemini Studio there was an office boy also, and on the days when there was a crowd scene to be shot, means when crowd shooting was there, then this office boy was so busy because he had to take heaps of pancake and he had to slap it on the faces of the people of the crowd. So that was another funny thing that is the writer is telling us. And then that office boy was very busy on those days when crowd scene was there, because he and then actually the idea was to close every pore on the surface of the face in the process of applying makeup. Means they wanted to close all the pores on the faces of those actress and actresses, junior artists actually. So actually then we come to know about this office boy. In this chapter characters are very important. So first main character we come to know about is this office boy, and actually he was not a boy, he was in his early 40s, he was around 40 years old, but still his designation was office boy. And he had entered Gemini Studio years ago in the hope of becoming a star actor or a top screenwriter, but he couldn't become like that, and ultimately he became just an assistant of the chief makeup man, and he started being, people started calling him as the office boy. Then the narrator Ashoka Mitran tells that he was working in a cubicle. In those days he had got one cubicle, one cabin was given to him which had two whole sides and French windows were there. And then he tells that whenever he would be sitting in that cubicle, that boy, that office boy would come and he would disturb him a lot. And then he waited ki some crowd scene should be created over there, so that this office boy gets busy and he gets rid of him. So that is again another funny thing, that he wanted to get rid of that office boy because he used to disturb him a lot. After this we come to know about another character, that is I think the most important character of this chapter that the writer is telling us about, that is Kotha Mangalam Subbu. So now this Subbu was the number 2 at the Gemini Studio, and he couldn't have had a more encouraging opening in films than our grown-up makeup boy had. Means actually what happened, that all these people who were working at Gemini Studio, they had come to that industry with the dream of becoming some top actor. But ultimately, as fate would have been, they all were doing some other works. They couldn't become main actors and main heroes, and now they were working. Somebody was working as an office boy, somebody was working as some assistant, director, anything like that. So same was the case with Subbu. He had also come there to work as an actor, but he could never get a leading role. So initially he had done some small roles, some character roles, but whatever role he had done it quite authentically, and he was satisfied with that, and he was considered number 2 at Gemini Studio. The reason was that he was very close to the boss. The boss was number 1, Subbu was number 2, and he was considered number 2 only because of his proximity, his closeness to the boss. And he was a Brahmin, and that was an added advantage for him. He must have had exposure to more affluent situations and people. But the quality of Subbu was that he was always cheerful at all times, even after having had a hand in a flop film. Even means he would participate in a flop film, still he was always having a cheerful expression on his face. That was another quality of Subbu. And he was a tailor made for films, and like whenever the director was shooting any scene, and Subbu will come with 10 ideas for that one scene. So that was another quality of Subbu, that he would always be ready with more than 10 ideas for the director, that you can do the scene in this way, in that scene, in that way, and all. So he gave direction and definition to Gemini Studios during its golden years. He was an integral part of Gemini Studios, Subbu, and he had a separate identity as a poet also. Actually, all these people who were working at Gemini Studio, they were poets also. Another common thing among all the people. So then he was an amazing actor, and he was such a charitable and cheerful person, but still he had enemies. The reason was that because he was very close to the boss, so people got jealous of him. Then Subbu always he was always with the boss, but in attendance roles he was grouped under a department called the story department. Now, means we have come to know about Subbu in detail. So now we come to know that there was a department at Gemini Studio, and that was called the story department. And in that story department, there was one lawyer and an assembly of writers and poets. So now we will come to know about the lawyer. So lawyer was actually the legal advisor of Gemini Studio, but he was a very difficult person. Means he had some problem with the lead actress of that movie. Means the writer is telling us about one incident that once a shooting was going on, and that actress got very angry. She started speaking something in anger, and he turned the recorder on. Means he recorded the angry shouting of that heroine and he played it on, and then he had to, that actress got so angry with that lawyer that he had to get rid of his job. Means he had been fired off from his job. So this one incident is given in this chapter. Then the legal advisor was a part of that story department, and he wore pants and a tie and sometimes a coat that looked like a coat of mail. Means his appearance was also funny. Then we come to know about the boss. Means the boss, he was allowed to produce a film, and through a lot of raw stock and pancake were used on it, but not much came of the film. So then finally one day the boss closed down the story department because it had failed, and this was perhaps the only instance in all human history where a lawyer lost his job because the poets were asked to go home. Means all the people who were working in the story department, they all had to lose their job because a film had flopped, and because of that the lawyer also had to lose his job. Then Gemini Studio was the favorite haunt of poets like S.D.S. Yogiyar, Sangu Subramaniam, Krishna Shastri and Hridaynath Chattopadhyay. And at that time, those were the days when Congress rule meant prohibition, and meeting over a cup of coffee was rather satisfying entertainment. And most of the people at Gemini Studio in those days, they wore khadi and they worshipped Gandhiji, and they were called, and they all were averse to the term of communism. So this is another important point of this chapter, that they were against communism because they thought that communists were godless men. Means they had no faith in God, and they had no hesitation even in killing their own people, their own children, and that's why these people hated these communists. So then another point in the chapter is given that Frank Buchman's Moral Rearmament Army came to visit Gemini Studio in 1952, and it consisted of 200 strong people, and they came there. Actually someone called this group as the International Circus, and the narrator could not understand like what they were coming for and who were those people, but they enacted some plays in Gemini Studio, and although their plays were not so good, but their setting and their background and the sound effects, all these things were very good, and they were liked by everybody. And then the writer tells us about MRA. MRA was the Moral Rearmament Army, and actually they had come there. It was a kind of counter movement to international communism, and big bosses of Madras like Mr. Vasan simply played into their hands. So that Moral Rearmament Army visited Gemini Studio, and they played some plays over there. Then a few months later, again they came to know that somebody was going to visit their Gemini Studio again. So they came to know that actually some poet, means one poem from England was coming, And the people at Gemini Studio, they had heard only the names of very common poets like Wordsworth or Tennyson, Keats, Shelley and Byron. But they came to know that the person who was coming to visit Gemini Studio, he was not any of these poets. So he came there and he was a very tall man, very English, very serious, and of course very unknown to all the people. They couldn't recognize that man. He gave a speech over there, but his speech was very difficult to understand. Even his accent they couldn't understand. So all the people were a bit confused who that man was. He delivered his lecture and he went away, but nobody came to know about him. So later on, the writer Asoka Mitran, when he had it was for such people that Hindu published a tiny announcement in an insignificant corner of an unimportant page. A short story contest was organized by a British periodical by the name The Encounter. So now this writer was just he found that he found some copies of the book Encounter, lying about in various degrees of freshness. And here, when he read the editor's name in that magazine, The Encounter, he was shocked to see that it was, he saw the picture of that man also, and it was Stephen Spender. And then he came to know that actually Stephen Spender had visited their studios earlier when they could not recognize him. Here a point is to be noted that Stephen Spender is the same poet who has written your poem An Elementary School Classroom in a Slum. So you can understand it better in that way. So now then the writer tells us that so many years later, when he had left Gemini Studio, then again everything that was being sold cheaper, that attracted him. So one day in the market he found that some books were being sold at 50%. So he bought one book that was, the name of that book was The God That Failed. And again he found that this book was written by none other than Stephen Spender. So then he immediately remembered his days in the Gemini Studio, and he was very happy to know. He remembered that although he had stopped working at Gemini Studio, and the boss of the Gemini Studios may not have much to do with the Steve Spender's poetry, but not with his God that failed. So at this point, this chapter comes to an end. So I have tried to cover up all the important sequences of actions in this chapter. So now we will see which questions may be asked. Mostly the question may be asked most important question is asked from about Subbu, who was the most important character at Gemini Studio, Subbu number 2. Then about the makeup department of this Gemini Studio. Then we can see about that moral rearmament army, what was that. Then who visited Gemini Studio, which influential poet or writer visited Gemini Studio, Stephen Spender. And then about office boy, some questions may be asked. So you have to prepare all these points, and I hope you must have understood the chapter, and now it will be easier for you to understand when you read it from your book. So our day 8 is over. Now very few days are left for your final exam. So keep preparing seriously and sincerely, and do share this video with other friends also, so that they can also be benefited. And thank you for watching, and do subscribe to my channel if you haven't yet. Thank you.